Rome, an empire of power, conquest, and unimaginable cruelty. Behind the grandeur of the Colosseum and the mighty legions lurks a darker history, one of brutal punishments that will haunt your nightmares. From being devoured alive to an unspeakable fate atop a nightmarish machine, these were not just punishments, they were spectacles of terror. You won't believe the last one, so make sure to like and subscribe if you dare. Now let's step into the darkness and uncover the 5 most brutal punishments of the Roman Empire. 1. The gruesome fate of the Scaphism. You'd think dying in water would be quick, but what if you were forced to drown in your own filth? That's exactly what happened to criminals who suffered the brutal fate of Scaphism, or as it's more ominously called, the boat torture. Victims were stripped naked, their bodies smeared with honey to attract insects. They were then strapped between 2 wooden boats, their heads, hands, and feet exposed. The Romans would force-feed them milk and honey to ensure they didn't die of starvation. But here's the horrifying twist. The honey wasn't to feed them. It was to keep them alive, ensuring they rotted away slowly as insects feasted on their flesh. Days, sometimes weeks later, all that would remain was a withered husk, crawling with creatures, and that's just the beginning of the Romans' brutality. 2. The horrifying fate of the sitting execution, the horse that broke bodies. This next one will make you wince in pain. The torture horse, also known as the wooden horse or the Roman mule, was a horrifying way of punishing soldiers who disobeyed orders. Picture this: a sharp-edged wooden structure shaped like a triangular prism, resembling a horse's back. Victims were forced to sit on the sharp ridge, sometimes with heavy weights tied to their legs. The longer they were forced to sit, the deeper the cutting edges would slice into their flesh. Some were left there for hours, others days, until the wounds festered and their bodies gave out. It was an execution so cruel that even the most hardened soldiers feared the very sight of it. 3. Killing by wild animals, the blood sport of Rome. The Colosseum, the grandest stage of Roman entertainment. But what the audience came to see wasn't a play, it was a slaughter. Damnatio et Bestias, condemnation to the beasts, was one of Rome's most brutal punishments. Criminals, prisoners of war, and even innocent Christians were thrown into the arena, left to face lions, bears, tigers, and worse. The animals were starved for days, their hunger turning them into feral killing machines. Some victims were armed with nothing but a dagger, a false hope against the inevitable. The crowd roared, the ground stained red, and Rome enjoyed the show. 4. Peeling skin off, a death beyond imagination. A punishment so extreme, even the toughest warriors screamed for mercy. In some cases, the Romans used flaying, the brutal peeling of skin from a still living body. The victim was stripped naked, tied down, and their executioners would take a razor-sharp blade and slowly remove their skin. Some were flayed partially to prolong the agony, others were skinned alive entirely. Some accounts claim salt was rubbed into their raw flesh, making every breath, every movement, a fresh wave of unbearable pain. The goal? To break not just the body, but the very soul. 5. Crucifixion, a death meant to break the soul. And now must the final horror. It's one of the most infamous executions in history. But what they don't tell you, crucifixion wasn't just about dying, it was about suffering. The Romans perfected this slow, agonizing death. First, the victim was flogged with a flagrum, a whip designed with bone and metal hooks to tear flesh from bone. Then they were nailed to a cross, not through the hands as often depicted, but through the wrists and ankles, where the pain was unbearable. But the true horror? The slow suffocation. As the body hung, the victim struggled to breathe. Hours turned into days as vultures circled above, waiting for their feast. Crucifixion wasn't just a punishment, it was a warning. Defy Rome, and you'd beg for a quicker death. The Roman Empire was built on power, but its foundations laid in blood. These punishments weren't just meant to kill, they were meant to terrorize, to make sure no one ever dared challenge Rome. But if you thought these were evil, Wait until you hear about the most horrifying acts of the pharaohs. Click the link now, and as always, like, subscribe, and comment below what dark history you want us to uncover next.